Welcome to OkState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in. Joined by Chase Whitwiska, as I am each and every week. And, Coach, I think we woke up this morning on Sunday morning just as confused about yesterday's game as we left Boone Pickens Stadium yesterday. It was like, I don't know what the hell I just saw, but I just know I'm glad OSU won, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, a win's a win. It wasn't pretty, especially in the first half. The second half, it was a totally different team. And they were a lot more fun to watch in the second half. But that was the most confusing game that I've ever seen in my life.
It absolutely was. Oklahoma State comes out and, has some early success on that first drive, and they're throwing their RPOs. And then I'll be honest with you, Coach, on that third down run, very first drive, I'm big on, in baseball, when teams score first, they win like over 80% of the time. That's an actual statistical fact for many teams at the major league level. So that first drive many times sets the tone for the entire game. Oklahoma State has a good drive. They're running their RPOs. They get to a third down, and Ollie Gordon just kind of tiptoes up to the line of scrimmage and doesn't get a first down that he really, I think he should have on that 3rd and 2. And then Arkansas gets the ball. They run a couple of really nice plays. They run a boot off of a zone play. They run a counter where they actually run the running back away from a couple of pullers. And, here you are, Brian Nardo. Arkansas has a brand-new quarterback. They have a brand-new running back that transferred from Utah. The quarterback, Taylon Green, transferred from Boise State. They have all new receivers. They have a brand-new offensive coordinator in Bobby Petrino, who, by the way, is one of the best X&O offensive guys out there. It was a difficult puzzle for Coach Nardo to solve yesterday.
It definitely was. I think Arkansas looks a lot better than they did last year. If you were to have watched their team last year, they just were not very good. With the transfers that they had come in, they looked like a whole lot better team. Their quarterback was really, really talented. 22, the running back was really, really, really talented. He just kept getting hurt, man. I kept looking at my brother. I was like, why are they putting him back in? Yeah, right. Because, he went down no less than 4 or 5 times. But I would say at the end of the day, like I said, a win is a win. But if you go back to that third down call, Ollie was still running like Ollie, but he was running like he was playing a Big 12 team. Like we were talking about this before, there's a big size difference and a big physicality difference between the Big 12 and the SEC. The Big 12 is a lot faster, but the SEC is a lot bigger and stronger. Right. So I think he was trying to be a little bit patient and find his hole, but with how big those guys are, it's going to be really, really hard to find that hole. I think he'd have been better off maybe bouncing outside, and they had a lot of more success running the ball outside than they did in between the tackles. But I think that they figured that out as the game went on. But I think that's why you kind of saw it looked like he wasn't running like himself, but he was running like himself just against a Big 12 defense as opposed to an SEC defense.
Right. I was going to say it straight up. I don't mean to throw shade. I don't mean to be negative at all. I expect more out of Ollie Gordon. The guy is a Heisman Trophy candidate, quality back. We all love Ollie Gordon. We know how awesome this guy is. I think he needs to play better. I think he needs to run the ball a bit harder. I think he needs to give Oklahoma State a little bit more in the run game. Now, I know he broke 13 tackles last week, so what I'm saying here is pretty much ludicrous in a lot of areas, but I just thought yesterday that, I kind of left expecting more out of him. I hope that doesn't sound too negative, but hey, I thought there were a lot of negatives in this game yesterday. The one big positive, obviously, I've said this many times, when you're Oklahoma State and you have the schedule you do, all you got to do is win the Big 12, win all your games. You don't have to have style points.
Right.
Just figure out a way to have one more point than the other team. That's all OSU has to do every week. So, hey, you won the game. That's the big part of it. But there were a lot of negatives that you need to cover, I think, and have the tough conversations. I thought Casey Dunn had a really nice first drive. I thought they were running their RPOs. They were doing a good job. He called the right play on third down. Ollie just didn't get the first down. But then after that first drive, it just seemed like it was really sluggish for Casey Dunn to get in a rhythm in terms of how to attack the Arkansas defense.
I would agree 100%. And I think you would have gotten more out of Ollie Gordon had the scheme been a little bit better.
Good point.
For their competition. I'll say it over and over again. There's a big difference between SEC and Big 12. You can't run between the tackles in an SEC against an SEC defense with a Big 12 O-line. And we have a very talented O-line, don't get me wrong. But if you were to look at the size, if you were there at Boone Pickens yesterday, if you would have looked at the size from end to end, there was a dramatic difference between what you saw the week prior to this week and what you're going to see next week and the week after that. Okay, that's the biggest and strongest team I bet you we play all season.
Yeah, most likely, especially with that quarterback. Reminded me of Vince Young. He had that number 10 on his back, and it's like once he opens that gate in the open field, like on those bootlegs, I mean, it's like he's covering 5 yards on every stride. Taylor Green, who we're talking about, who it was an interesting kind of hodgepodge in terms of how the Cowboys defensed him. Obviously, when you give up over 600 yards, you can't say that any of it was good. But you lose Colin Oliver early, and I mentioned all the difficult elements and dynamics to trying to figure out the puzzle with really not a whole lot of information to go by. Then you lose Colin Oliver. You know, you blitz Jake Roberson in the first drive. You get them stopped after their first drive, and then you have the big pick six, and then Colin Oliver goes down. So just about the time Coach Nardo was putting the pieces together, you lose one of your big pass rush elements. And really, I know Arkansas ran the ball well yesterday, but to me, the biggest reason why Oklahoma State just couldn't get them stopped ever was because they couldn't get pressure on Taylor Green without blitzing. Right. And a lot of that was because you lost Colin Oliver.
Right, I agree. You know, in looking back, obviously hindsight is 2020. But sitting there and thinking about the game after it happened, there was a lot of success when they did blitz, because what they did was they contained the quarterback when they brought an extra man. And when you contained him, he was not near as good as if he got out of the pocket. If he got out of the pocket, he was very, very dangerous. But if you keep him inside the pocket, he has a good arm and he has arm talent, but he is definitely scarier with his legs than he is with his arm. So I think that if you were to look back and look at some of the calls that provided pressure on the quarterback, that was when the defense itself saw him the most success. You know, the quarterback was rushed. He didn't make as good of decisions. He felt the pressure. He got sacked a few times. He tried to find a way out of the pocket. He couldn't get out of the pocket because they were right in his face. So, like I said, hindsight's 2020. But I think if you put more pressure and provide more pressure on the quarterback, I don't think he would have had the day that he had yesterday if he'd done it from snap one. Absolutely.
Taylor Green, 18 carries on the day. That's a lot for a quarterback. And, of course, some of those are bootlegs. They're read option plays to where, it's a two-way go for a quarterback, either give or keep. But 18 carries for Taylor Green, 104 yards. Jaquindon Jackson, the Utah transfer running back, the one that you mentioned kept going out, he had 24 carries, 156. So it was a good rushing attack for Arkansas yesterday. I think none of that surprises me. When you play Bobby Petrino, you know it's going to be an absolute nightmare trying to shut down the other team's rushing attack. I mean, we saw it even when he brought his Missouri State teams in. Oklahoma State just struggled mightily, even with the athletes at Missouri State brought in when Bobby Petrino was there. So, it's an offense that's not easy to defend, especially like I mentioned, whenever they have new players. But I'll say this, they figured out a way to get some turnovers to neutralize a lot of the yards that Arkansas had. And then they figured out, until the last two drives, how to keep them off the scoreboard in the second half. I don't know how, but I know they did.
Yeah. No, I mean, he definitely does what he does. He reminds me a lot of Coach Gundy, honestly, because Coach Gundy came out and said it last week. He said, we're just going to do what we do. And if you beat us, you beat us. If you don't, then we did our job. But he's not going to shy away from what he's done his entire career, which is establish the run and make you fit gaps and make you play the run correctly. And then once you do that, then you're looking at a play action. He's a really, really good play caller. And that's why he's seen a lot of success over his entire career. He's a hard offense to stop because, like I said, he establishes the run, and then you've got to play action. And then when you have a quarterback that can run as well, that makes it really, really hard to defend.
I was very impressed with the poise of Taylor Green. I know Boise State, they won the Mountain West Conference, I think is what Boise State's in. I know they won their conference last year, which is a big deal, but still, this was the biggest stage he'd ever been on. I thought he did a really good job of staying poised. There were a couple of times, especially in the second half, especially after Oklahoma State took the lead, they could have bowed out and said, hey, it's been a good day, boys, but it was a good effort. But, hey, let's just send it on back to Arkansas and let's take it like we kind of did last year. They were in most games. I mean, yesterday was a microcosm of what happened to Arkansas over and over and over last year. But he didn't. He responded every single time. So I was very impressed with the poise of Taylor Green.
Yeah, and that was a hostile environment too. That was a fun environment to be in. It wasn't the.
I thought it was good. I didn't think it was like OU good, but I thought it was a good environment.
It was. I mean, the Striped Stadium was pretty cool. It got loud at times. It's definitely not like OU, but it's going to be hard to match an OU environment. That one's just different. But I would say that was a really cool environment. Not only, like I said, to see the Striped Stadium, but it was sold out and nobody left. The whole stadium stayed full the entire game. So I think with that quarterback going in and doing what he did, that was really impressive, because I believe 100% that's the toughest environment he's ever played in, and that's probably one of his best games that he's ever had.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is because he was able to stay upright and clean for most of the days, like I said, unless Oklahoma State blitz. But, hey, what'd you think about Alan Bowman? Kind of mixed results for him. He was okay early, then not very good in the middle, and then tell you what, he made the big plays when he had to, though. Made some huge throws in some huge situations.
He did, but his inaccuracy really concerns me. I mean, it was concerning last week. If you look at how many balls that receivers had to dive for or lay out for that are just simple hitch routes that could be put on that outside shoulder. I know what he's trying to accomplish. However, there's got to be a little bit more accuracy there, because you're relying on, luckily you have really, really, really good receivers to help you out and make plays. But I mean, there were some times there was a crossing route that Brennan Presley was wide open. I mean, wide open on a third down play, and he overshoots him. And that stuff can't happen, especially in against a high caliber opponent, and in big games, you've got to make throws.
27 for 48, 326, one touchdown, one interception. He had a long of 63. I would not disagree with you that there were some times to where the inaccuracy was there. But I will say this about Alan Bowman. It's kind of like a pitcher stands out there and they do this and they do that, and then all of a sudden you look up and you go, well, damn, I've got the bases loaded and one out. I better hook up and start making some pitches. Right. And then they go to work and they bear down in the crisis moment, and then they make the pitches that they have to get themselves out of a jam. That's kind of what Alan Bowman felt like yesterday. I'll tell you what, when I want my quarterback to be his best is when the game is on the line and when it matters the most. And it does really feel like Alan Bowman does his best work when the game does matter the most.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I don't want it to get close. Sure. I truly think that if he had played his best football, I think Oklahoma State wins the game by 10 plus. Just like I said, with the inaccuracy and a couple of missed throws, it could have been big plays, really big plays that could have led to touchdowns or scores, whether that be a field goal or a touchdown. I don't think you go into overtime. I think that you win that game not handily, but fairly comfortably, to the point to where you're not, making every person in the stadium and sitting at home watching on the TV sweat bullets.
I thought OSU was in trouble when they went overtime. I just felt like Arkansas's rushing game, and when you rush for Ollie Gordon gets 51 yards. And you rush for a total of 68. And again, I said this last week, your second leading rusher is your quarterback, who's not a running quarterback, in Alan Bowman. And that's just your second leading rusher had 9 yards yesterday. So when Oklahoma State went to overtime, the way Arkansas had ran the ball, Arkansas had 283 yards on the ground. That just felt like that highly favored Arkansas. And then the first play that Arkansas has in overtime, they rip off like 11 yards. And you're like, man, this is – Oklahoma State coaches had to figure out a way to overcome some pretty heavy odds, in my opinion, in the overtime, and they did it. And they got two-point conversions, one in regulation, one in overtime. It's pretty incredible how it all happened.
It was, but they wouldn't have been in overtime had they not gotten screwed by the officials. Yeah. The offsides penalty was ridiculous. I mean, that was horrible. And that would didn't you knee the ball 3 times, the game's over, or kick field goal or something like that. Yeah. But I don't think they'd have been put in that situation had they not been messed over twice. But it doesn't matter. Came out with a win. So I thought that Sam Pittman's clock management was piss poor, to say it in the nicest way. I mean, that was so bad.
Yeah, they left 2 seconds on the clock, but and they got lucky. The ball was incomplete, that last pass. I was hoping it was, when I was watching, I was like, please catch that ball.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't see it. Like, I don't see how your clock management and the game management in itself can be that bad, especially at an Arkansas, who's traditionally has been really, really good and has fallen off over the past 10, 20 years. But
SEC's done that to them.
Yeah, I mean, but it amazed me.
You're not playing Baylor and those kind of, and you're playing LSU, and,
right?
Which it's not necessarily that those schools are that much better or have that much more potential than Baylor. It's the recruiting grounds. I mean, Arkansas forever was the only team in the SEC in this area, so they lost a lot of the recruiting base in Texas because Texas A&M, well, then Texas A&M left, but especially before Texas A&M left, which is a large part of the time you're talking about that Arkansas fell off. Now that OU's back in, Texas is back in, Texas A&M's back in, their recruiting will spike.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I like I said, and I mean that in the nicest way, because I like Sam Pittman as a person. I think he's hilarious, and I think he's a good guy. But he's not a good head coach, and that I truly think that Oklahoma State won that game solely based off of how bad he performed.
I think he's a really good coach. Sometimes guys aren't maybe just suited as the head coach, but we'll see. He still has plenty of time to, I think it would be interesting, like if they rip off an 8-4. Something like that, what that would do for them. But hey, those are their problems. That it's been. It was kind of interesting to me because I don't really remember the OSU Arkansas series back in the 70s and 80s. I think I was 7 years old last time that they actually played. But I've heard all the war stories about, Arkansas fans this, Arkansas that. As soon as OSU beat them, Arkansas, just told OSU to take a hike. And that I had heard nothing about, other than just Arkansas being arrogant and Arkansas thinking they're holier than thou than Oklahoma State. I tell you what, man, every Arkansas fan that I came in contact with yesterday was super humble about the experience, and they all predicted that Arkansas would fall apart at the end. Every single, like 25 of them, they're like, hey, yeah, this is all fun. Just wait till the end of the game. We'll fall apart and give it to you. Trust me on that. They all said it was amazing, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, well, and they've seen it. They've seen it a lot longer than we have, And I would say that we've been in that boat sometimes as well. We choke off some pretty bad performances when we need to have them. But I wouldn't say to that extent. I was a little nervous going into overtime, but at the same time, I felt kind of comfortable because if you watch them in this, the team itself, Oklahoma State's team itself in the second half was nothing like the team in the first half.
Right.
And that's because they made fantastic adjustments in the locker room, and they made great adjustments at halftime, not only to figure out how to stop Arkansas and slow them down a little bit offensively, but they also figured out how to move the ball against Arkansas's defense effectively as well. You did see Ollie Gordon get outside a little bit more in the second half, and that's where he saw success. You saw the RPOs come back into play. You saw they were really letting
tight end.
They used the tight end quite a bit, and then you also saw Brennan Presley kind of run free a little bit. They kind of allowed him to use his speed, which I thought was really good because I don't care what conference you're in, he's a hard sucker to keep up with because he's really fast. And not only is he really fast, but he's really smart.
Yeah, they compared him to those old magic balls that we used to have as a kid.
The little bouncy balls. Oh man. But yeah, I mean,
Gundy was on his A game yesterday at the post conference. By the way,
it was pretty funny.
If you have not seen his post game press conference, go check it out.
You absolutely should, because you should see what he's saying about the rest too. It was great.
Yeah, it was great.
It was awesome. But and I don't think he was wrong, and that's an unbiased opinion. I think that going back to the reffing situation, I thought that was really, really bad.
Felt like on the offsides, they had offsides to begin with. They conferenced together, and they came up with the path of least resistance. It's always easier to call a false start than it is to say the defense caused the false start. I just felt like they got together and took the easy way out on that.
Yeah, and if you go back and watch the replay, I thought that it was a simultaneous movement, not only with the motion, but jumping off sides. I thought it happened at the exact same time, which, if I'm calling a game, I might call a false start. But if it's a motion, it is not a false start. Now, if it's different, if the tackle steps back, obviously that's a false start. But if there's a motion, you almost have to tune everything else out. You can't hear the snap count. You can't take that into consideration. All you can see is the motion, and then the jumping of offsides. So, in my opinion, I think that it was offsides, and I don't think that you can call that because there was a motion, or there was a tight end in motion.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I'll tell you what, we talk about, hey, Oklahoma State this, Oklahoma State that. You give up, 600 and a half, some odd yards. Ollie Gordon, your Heisman Trophy candidate running back, only gets 51 yards. Your quarterback, again, is your second leading rusher. He had a sporadic day, I think, would be the best way to say all that. Your defense struggled to contain a running quarterback in Taylon Green. They struggled to contain the feature back for Arkansas. You're behind almost the entire game. You had a couple of bad calls go against you from the officials. So you throw all that into the mix, and then somehow you win the game. So I say all that to say, this about me, Chase. I've never been big on the culture talk for Oklahoma State because I felt like at times that culture, hey, we have a culture, has been used to kind of hide some bad recruiting, maybe some average recruiting, if you will, to say, we're just going to go get a bunch of just decent players. We're going to turn them into good people, and we're going to have a nice program. That kind of thing, which to me was a little bit too easy. Okay, but I'll tell you what, in the last 2 or 3 years, Oklahoma State's won some games to where I'm like yesterday, where I walk out going, I have no other explanation or no other analysis other than to say Oklahoma State made the right decisions down the stretch. Nobody panicked. The other team did panic. The other team made all the mistakes down the stretch, and that's exactly how culture actually wins games. So I'm bought in on it now, and I haven't been in the past.
I am too, and you can't tell me that Oklahoma State has better recruiting classes than Arkansas. They don't, and they didn't have better recruiting classes than Oklahoma when they beat them the past 2 out of 3 years. They've never had a better recruiting class than Texas over the past however many years that they played them and beat them. You take all that into account, and you look at what they do recruit and just kind of the hard-nosed, tough kids. You don't have the biggest, fastest, or strongest kids, but I would go to bat and say that they play harder than anybody else that I've watched, and that's play in and play out. It doesn't really feel like they take a play off, and if it does, it's almost obvious because you're like, what the heck? Like that didn't look right,
Like my Ollie Gordon take, I didn't feel like he ran the ball hard enough on that first third down.
Yeah,
I felt like you should have just kind of busted through and just get the first down, man.
I'm playing devil's advocate on that because I do think that there is a big difference in how you have to run against SEC caliber opponents and then Big 12 caliber opponents. It's just it's two different games. The Big 10 is a completely different game than the SEC and the Big 12. Each conference kind of has its own identity. I would say the Big 12 is definitely speed. The SEC is more of a power kind of football, and then the Big 10 is more of just a ground and pound. Like, hey, we're just going to run the ball, and you're going to have to stop it. Probably heavier on the defensive side in the Big 10, more so than the SEC or the Big 12. I do think that the culture that they've established and that they have. I'll let him preach about it all day long because it's working. Yeah,
there's long been this theory or thought, and you hear it from the snobs at ESPN. You go immediately halftime, Oklahoma State can't handle the big girth of Arkansas. And it was like the first comment. And then as soon as the game's over, crickets. It's like, oh, okay, well, what about now? Yeah. Right? And so I'll say this to that. They say, Oklahoma State or Big 12 teams week in and week out couldn't handle the physicalness and this and that. Open your eyes. Look who the fresher team was at the end of the game last night. Or yesterday, Saturday, whenever you're watching this. which team had the most amount of energy. I mean, you mentioned Arkansas's running back. He couldn't handle 2 or 3 plays in a row without going down. Oklahoma State was the team that was the fresher team at the end of the game yesterday. So don't give me any of this crap about the SEC style of football wearing down Big 12 teams, because the team that wore down yesterday was Arkansas, the SEC team, not Oklahoma State. I'll stick by that. I'll stick by those guns every day and twice on Sundays.
Yeah, and not only do you think the Cowboy culture for that and Mike Gundy, but you have to thank Rob Glass.
Yeah, Monty by Glass.
That just goes to show you how great of a job he does. And Gundy covered that in his press conference at the end of the game yesterday as well, as he talked about how they were at the end of the game, they weren't stuck in air.
No, Arkansas was.
Yeah, and I think Coach Gundy was more comfortable almost at the end of the game than he was the beginning, and that's because he knew, he was like, dude, we've prepared for this all summer, we've prepared for it all fall, all the way back into last spring. You know, our guys are ready to go, and this is what we train them for. You know, we train them to go to the fifth quarter, if you will, and it definitely showed. You know, I don't think that. You didn't really see a whole lot of substitution on the offense, and when
right.
you look at Arkansas, dude, they were bringing in new running backs. They were bringing in at some point, I thought I saw them bringing in new linemen. You know, they were bringing in tight ends. They were bringing in all kinds of new guys because they were sucking wind.
Hey man, you got any final thoughts? Yesterday was a crazy day. I mean, we could sit here for like 19 hours and come up with the biggest plays of the game and some of the cool stuff that happened. There was just so many different plays. You know, the Alan Bowman makes the beautiful pass to Brendan Presley and then runs down the sideline talking crap to the Arkansas. Okay, Mulligan for me. He's made some nice plays. He came through in the clutch yesterday. He's never really done anything like that before. We won the game. Mulligan for me on that one. That's one of those, hey, kid, don't ever do that again, all right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't like it.
I didn't like it because it cost his team.
Exactly. That's why I didn't like it. And not only that, but it's like, dude, you hadn't played the best today. So let's just take what we can. Let's take what we get and move on. Now I get it. Football is a very emotional game, and it's a very exciting game to play. And when I saw the replay, I kind of laughed. I thought it was kind of funny because
it was funny until you put it into the context that it almost cost his team the game.
It did, and that's when I would have been livid, because it's like I said, dude, you hadn't played very good today, and now you're going and shooting pistols at their sideline. Like if that was a completion to get a first down, and now you're going to take 3 knees to end the clock because you have like a 2-point lead and the game's over, I would have thought that was funny as hell. Yeah,
but you still had to score and win the game, and at that point, it became way less funny.
Right, and you know, I still can't believe what happened with the kicking situation at the very end of the game. You know, I mean, our kicker's been money, you know, and I was shocked when he missed it, and I hope and pray that's the only one he does miss all season. But, you know, when we went and slid right down the middle of the field and just to set him up perfectly, I was like, I was grabbing my stuff. I was like, all right, man, this game's over. I'm going to try to get out of the parking lot before everybody gets there. And he missed it. And I was like, oh, crap. You know,
you're an OSU fan, Chase. You'll learn, man. You're so young, though. You get to be my age. That kind of stuff will not surprise you.
I wasn't necessarily surprised. I was just like,
I wasn't.
Oh, crap, man. It's
not that I expect failure anymore. There was a period in my life where I expected Oklahoma State football to fail every time it mattered. I've gotten over that. OSU football has gotten over that. Because of that, I'm proud of it. But you will learn never to be surprised about anything when it comes to OSU, Chase.
I hope I learn it quickly. Yeah. I really do, because I'm telling you, I was packing my stuff up. I was ready to get in the car and go. No. I was ready to go hit Canes, man. I was hungry. I was hot.
If I was sitting next to you, I would have said, sit your ass down and stop all that nonsense.
It's all right. You know, at the end of the day, we won the game. I still got to go get my Canes. I still got to get the air conditioning. So we were good. You know, but
you go cane sauce or ranch?
Cane sauce, 100%.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
100%.
No doubt.
That's the best chicken. Yeah,
it's good.
The sauce of chicken, or whatever you want to call it.
We had that Friday night. It's good.
Oh, it's money. It's so good. But No, I thought at the end of the day, like I said, a win's a win. Wasn't necessarily the prettiest, but you're 2-0 and you're moving on to a Tulsa team that's not going to be. I'm telling you, they're not going to be bad. I think the defense is going to have to play a little bit better because they do have some weapons. Presley's little brother is over there, and he's had a heck of a 2 games so far over there for Tulsa. I think that he's going to come out with a little bit of extra juice because he's playing his brother and his former team. So I think that he's going to be a guy that you're going to have to key on. And then, like I said, when Oklahoma State goes to Tulsa takes it personally.
Sure.
It's not going to be an easy game, and they're not going to roll over for Oklahoma State just because they're Oklahoma State. Now, if Oklahoma State goes out and plays like they're capable of playing, more so like they did against South Dakota State than Arkansas, I think that they roll through the game pretty easily. But if they don't take care of the football and they don't play their brand of football, and they go up to Tulsa and jack around a little bit, it's going to be a close game, and it's going to be uncomfortable. What I'm hoping that they can do is they can get up and they can rest their starters because you've got a big time Utah game the week after that. So the more rest, if you can get Ollie off his feet, if you can get Alan Bowman off his feet and get Rangel in the game a little bit, I think that's going to be beneficial. I hope to see Zane Flores too. I've been curious to see what he's like and looks like in game time situation. But I think this is a good opportunity for them to, like I said, get those starters to play 3 quarters and let the younger guys get out and get some experience. But like I said, it's not going to be an easy thing to do, so you're going to have to go and take care of business.
Forgot to mention our last topic here. How about that last play by Kendall Daniels? Anybody that was worried about whether he's physical enough, we talked about this last week. What he actually is good at is coming up and fitting the run and being physical and tackling in space, which is pretty much what he did on that last play, and then finishing. Both him and Trey Rucker are great at that. So if you're worried about Kendall Daniels being physical enough, just watch how he sunk down into that tackle, how he knew. It's one thing to go hit the guy, but what he really knew, if you watch his technique, he knew that it had to be a stalemate. The running back could not move forward at all. So he sunk down, made sure that the running back could not have any more forward momentum, and finished the play. What a tremendous play by Kendall Daniels. Wow.
Yeah, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but when we talked last week, I told you this is a better situation for him than playing safety. Right. He's a more physical presence, and he is big. I mean, he is a really big guy.
When his motor runs, he's big time.
Yeah, and he is much better at playing the run than he is playing the pass, and he's not bad at playing the pass, but him fitting the run, you just saw a tidbit of what you're going to see the rest of the season when it comes to him filling those holes and getting more comfortable in that linebacker position, because that was pure instinct, and that's going to become more and more normal for him as he gets more comfortable at that linebacker position. Yep. And I think that when hopefully if he goes on to the NFL, that's where he's going to play. He ain't going to play safety. He's gonna be a big. They're gonna put some weight on him. He's gonna be a linebacker, a guy that
if not like defensive end or something.
Right, and he's gonna drop into coverage and things like that. But he is definitely more of an impact in terms of playing the run game than he is playing the pass.
Well, I'll tell you this: he's a hell of a lot better at covering backs out of the backfield, which is what you do more as a linebacker, than he is covering slot receivers, which is what you do more as a safety.
I think that has to do with speed, and he's not slow. But if you look at the slot receiver for Oklahoma State and Brennan Presley, in all due respect to Kendall Daniels, I think that Brennan Presley would run circles around him.
Yeah, right.
He really would. Those guys are hard to cover, and they're in the slot position for 2 reasons. One, because they're not as big, but they're also really fast. You look at a Rashad Owens and a Brennan Presley, there's a big size difference, but there's also a pretty good speed difference between the two. And slot backs are really hard to cover. Running backs, obviously, they're not as fast as slots. They're not even as fast as outside receivers in most cases. They're bigger and bulkier.
Quicker, maybe. Not necessarily faster, though.
Yeah, and I think that suits Kendall Daniels' game much better than it does a slot receiver.
Totally agree. Hey, Chase, this has been a lot of fun. It was a crazy day yesterday. And one thing Mike Gundy did say in his post-game conference that he is 1,000% correct is that one thing I really enjoy about Oklahoma State football, and this is even in the years where they weren't good. Like some of the years where Oklahoma State would go like 3-10 or like 3-7 back, or 3-8 back in the 11 game years. They still had like really fun games. They seemed like they would always lose them at the end. But watching Oklahoma State football for my entire life since 1973, it's just like every time you go to an Oklahoma State game, you're fully entertained.
Yeah.
It's a very fun 3 or 4 hours. And so it was a great day yesterday that Oklahoma State came out with a victory. So, hey, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining, Chase.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.